Yet another month, yet another story on Xinjiang. This week, I read a story from a respected American magazine on how, somehow, Uyghur labor is being hounded into working for Chinese fisheries here in Shandong province. Now, we know that the region of Xinjiang has attracted global attention over allegations of human rights abuses by the Chinese government. And when the United States government in early 2021 formally designated China's actions in Xinjiang as genocide, there has been a significant rise in these kinds of stories that claim mass detentions, forced labor, and cultural erasure in Xinjiang's largest ethnic group, the Uyghurs. Xinjiang is home to about 25 million people, and if the international media were to be believed, over a million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been detained by the state in re education camps under the guise of combating terrorism and religious extremism. But that is not what we are seeing on the ground in China. The reality is vastly different from the picture painted on our media screens. To discuss the situation in Xinjiang, I invited fellow teacher, researcher, and traveler from Colombia, Fernando Munoz Bernal, to the podcast this week. Fernando was exposed to Xinjiang as part of his documentary project that visits all parts of China. And having spent 5 months there, he is in a better position than most to talk about Xinjiang. This is the first of a two-part interview. In this episode, we delve into history and context of what happened in Xinjiang. We'll join the conversation as Fernando introduces himself and his relationship with Xinjiang.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for having me. My name is Fernando Munoz, and I'm from Colombia. Um, I've been living in China since the year 2000, and in the year 2021, I decided to semi-retire, and me and my wife decided to travel around China. We've been to a lot of parts in the east, and we've been in the west this year. But for what's the matter of today's video, we're probably going to be talking mostly about Xinjiang. I spent more than 140 days in Xinjiang, going to more than 40 locations and driving more than 15,000 kilometers, self-funded in my RV, in my electric vehicle that pulls an RV trailer, which is another issue that a lot of people find interesting. Can you actually drive an electric vehicle in Xinjiang? And the answer is yes, you can. And during my time in Xinjiang, I saw many things that I have documented and that I've posted on social media and videos on Twitter or X that, well, give a better idea as to what really is taking place in Xinjiang, what took place, and what is the reality on the ground vis-a-vis the perspective that has been presented to us by social media politicians and pundits from the West when they discuss Xinjiang. And things couldn't be more diametrically different. So, yeah, that's what we're going to discuss in this show, in this interview, that and many other things. So, I want to thank you, Mark, for the opportunity to share my experience traveling in Xinjiang and, yeah, sharing my thoughts and what my lenses can capture. So, thank you for having me.
So, how did you and your wife end up in Xinjiang? And was there anything you found particularly different about it?
I have been living in China since the year 2000. Um, I ran a series of language training centers until earlier last year, late 2021, when we decided to shut down the business. And given that I wasn't going to be working, me and my wife, we decided to go out and start traveling around China. The idea was to kind of like put together a documentary for 2024 about China, October 1st, 2024, and give China kind of like a present, having visited every province and region in the mainland. So that's how we got started. Um, so last year because we are working with a very specific setting, we have a trailer and we have an EV that pulls the trailer. Um, so we decided to start the first year on the East Coast because the infrastructure for charging EVs is a bit more developed in that area. We'd heard about projects to um, develop it way more in the West, but those were like in the future. So we decided to start on the East Coast. Started from Guangdong, where I have lived all this time. And we went all the way up to Shandong and Jilin, and then came down the center of the country. Um, but for this year, 2023, we started then going towards the west. We spent a few, 3 months, I think, in Yunnan. Um, don't know if you can hear the fireworks. They're celebrating the national holiday.
Yeah, yeah, good sound effects. So,
Yes, indeed. So from there, we went up through Sichuan relatively quickly because we wanted to get to Xinjiang early in the year because it gets really, really hot in the summer in the southern part of Xinjiang. So we wanted to get there as early as possible so that we could do the desert area um, and it would not be too hot. And then do the northern part of Xinjiang um, during summer, which is not so bad and it's bearable. There's another aspect that was important is that there is this highway in Xinjiang called the Duku um, that it's only open a few months a year because of the high altitude and the snow and it's very beautiful terrain but very difficult terrain. So yeah, we were looking at timing our arrival to Xinjiang early April, and we had planned 3 months, but it was just so much to see, so much to shoot. It's so big, Xinjiang, that we ended up spending 5 months there. So we've been on the road for now it's October, so a year and 22 months more or less. We've been on the road 22 months, and I started making very beautiful videos, very lengthy videos with lots of beautiful shots and drones and whatnot and music. But then I realized that the logistics of moving around, shooting, trying to find people to talk to, and editing and posting was extremely difficult. So I decided to just focus on getting the shots that I wanted for the documentary, getting the footage that I wanted, and just post some very simple things with my phone. I travel with high level equipment with cinema cameras and special microphones and things like that. So that's what I do for now. I'm not posting most of the content or most of the footage yet. I'm going to reserve that for the documentary that will be released in 2024, October 1st. But what I post on social media, on YouTube, or sometimes on Twitter is just what I just capture with my mobile phone. Um, but I guess that most of the people have found a lot of interest in my coverage of Xinjiang. So it's something that I think is important for people to see from a perspective. Um, because a lot of the things that people see from Xinjiang are what the government wants you to see.
so you're saying people were particularly interested in Xinjiang?
Yes, yes, more interested once you get to Xinjiang and you start to show a certain normalcy. People are interested in that. They're like, "Oh, so you're in Xinjiang? You're spending time over there," and then they start asking you questions about what it is like to travel, right? So the security issues, the freedom to shoot on all those things. So you start just making comments and making posts on social media, thing like this is this is what I see, this is how it is, this is how it's actually taking place. So yeah, it's kind of like political without being political. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just showing the reality that I see through my eyes, through my through my phone, basically, as to what Xinjiang is today. And of course, there is a vast difference with what Western media shows, and I understand why there is a difference. Just recently, there was a new video and article written by ABC Australia about a tour that the journalists were given of Xinjiang. And that's the thing. I mean, when media goes to Xinjiang, they want to show them what the best that Xinjiang has to offer, right? So a lot of the performances and a lot of the places, everything is prepared for them. And it's very different from what tourists see, from what I see, from what Chinese tourists see, from whoever wants to go to Xinjiang can see. Um, there's also been a lot of things in the news saying that, like, oh, they're trying to stop travel firms from actually bringing people to Xinjiang. They think that they're going to manipulate things, and then you cannot see what what they don't want you to see, what the government doesn't want you to see. And my reply to everybody is like, you don't need a travel firm. You don't need a tour guide. Just get your visa, fly to Urumqi, book your hotels, rent a car, or get a driver, and just Xinjiang is open to anybody. Xinjiang is there's only a couple of areas where you and any other Chinese person needs to get a permit, and those are like border areas. Xinjiang borders 8 different countries, so it's I don't see that as unusual, particularly with the history of Xinjiang. So yeah, if anybody wants to come to Xinjiang, they can just get on a plane, get a visa, and see it. They don't need travel firms. They don't need travel tours. There's no special permit or anything like that. And you're free to go everywhere and anywhere. Now, there are a bit of differences with the rest of China. One of them, for example, it's a law in China that whenever you travel as a foreigner, you need to register um, your temporary residence with the police, right? That's the law anywhere. The thing is that in other parts of China, that is not normally enforced. If you stay at a hotel, the hotel does that automatically for you. You don't need to worry about that. But if you are, I don't know, staying at a friend's house or renting a place, you have got to register within 24 hours with the police station. That's the norm, although it's not enforced in most places around China. But in Xinjiang, it's different. In Xinjiang, it is enforced. For foreigners, you need to register. And given that we're traveling in an RV, it's a little bit more, um, it's different. We don't stay in hotels very often. Every now and then we do to do laundry or to just take a very long hot shower. But most of the times, it's just we park in either RV camps, but that's not the same as a hotel. So we need to do the registration by ourselves, or in parking lots. We stayed in parks and places where we don't need to pay for our stay, but staying there, we need to make sure that we go to the police station and say, hey, here's my passport, here's my registration, and this is where I'm staying. So that was different, but is within the norm of what China expects a foreigner to do when they come here. Um, that's different from the security checks. That's like your temporary residence registration. But the security checks were different. I had the opportunity of going to Xinjiang in 2021, and we rented a car, me, my wife, and a friend, and we went out to see the cotton farms. It couldn't have been more than 50 kilometers, and there were more than 10 police checks in 2021. That can be a little bit annoying, particularly for foreigners, because while residents and Chinese people with their ID card, they can just read it and get visual identification, and that's it. They go. But for us, we our passports. Everybody has a different kind of passport. Some have chips, some don't. So it's all manual. So having to get out of the car and explain where you're from, when you came here, and all these things. So in 2021, that was a little bit annoying. Now in 2023, we found that the number of checkpoints is very, very little. Basically, they are at the exit of highways, um, and that's it. Basically, you go from one city to another, and just on highways, and also what they call guodaos, or national freeways, right? Anyway, when you're going from one place to another, there's a checkpoint at the entrance of the city, not when you leave the city. When you enter the city, when you enter a different town, when you enter a different county, right? So that's where there are checkups, and that was a huge difference from 2021. So the other thing is that they have installed now cameras that actually do facial recognition really, really well. So the local people who have registered their biometrics with authorities, they're driving, and all they have to do is roll down the windows, look at the camera, and they hand their IDs, and boop, it's an instant match. It takes a second, and off they go. So that was really, really different. Again, for me, as a passport holder, it was different. I actually had to get off the car, go to the police station that's in this at the exit of the highway, right at the exit of the highway, and show my passport. We already knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted to know three things. Oh, they wanted your info page. They wanted to know the last time that you entered China. For me, that was pre-COVID, and they wanted to see your visa, that you had a current visa. So basically, what we did to make things easier for ourselves, just make copies of all those three pages, and wherever we arrived, we just handed it to them, and they would kind of like corroborate that, okay, this is a real copy. This is, yeah, this is what it is, and we were done in 2 minutes. So we figured out that there are ways for us to make things easier. Um, so that was a difference from 2021, and it's something that is different from many parts of the country. You don't see checkpoints when you exit a highway in Guangdong, or when you exit a highway in Shandong. However, and this is interesting, you do that in Yunnan. Yunnan also borders several countries, some of them with some issues like Myanmar, and is the same. There are checkpoints in Yunnan in the border areas. So it's interesting because it's not only Xinjiang, is areas where the passage of people from one country to another could happen illegally. So they use these technologies to identify who doesn't belong there, who hasn't registered, who's not in the system, basically. So it's a mechanism that's very effective in sending alerts when they find somebody who hasn't come to the region through the proper channels. And that is not something that the West, well, it is something that the West can actually vilify very easily. Oh, Big Brother, blah blah, and this is what they're doing. It identifies Uyghurs and whatnot. No, it identifies whoever hasn't been registered, whether it's Uyghur, Kazakh, who any minority, or any even Han people. It doesn't matter. once you're registered. And these surveillance cameras actually work that way. They work to prevent illegal people from entering, and to send an alert when they detect somebody. Now, another thing that I found interesting and unusual was that every uh, single street light has a sign. It has the police number, which is 110 here in China, but every one of them has an identification number. And this is true all over Xinjiang. So 001 and 11476, whatever, there's thousands of them. And what this is used for is whenever there is an incident, which there hasn't been one since 2017, thank God, then people can actually call the police and say, hey, there's something taking place at 54376. That number gets input and cameras get to work to find what is it that's taking place, who is involved, and they have a very easy way to pinpoint the the operation that now is going to be required when somebody um, complains, or when somebody informs authorities of some kind of incident. So that was peculiar. I haven't seen that in other parts of China. Um, but it's just safety, is safety for the people. It makes people uh, know that if anything happens, something can be done.
So, given like the whole Xinjiang thing that the world knows about, or the perceptions, what's being reported, what's your understanding about what happened in Xinjiang? What did happen or not happen, and where Xinjiang is now relative to that incident or those incidents or non-incidents?
Well, Xinjiang suffered from terrorism for many, many years,
Mm,
more than 20 years.
okay.
Um, there's an interesting thing is there were extremism, there were extremists and radicalized people who wanted to separate, or wanted to impose their interpretation of Islam, an extremist interpretation of Islam in Xinjiang. And they also wanted to separate. They wanted
Hmm.
to turn it into East Turkestan. So that went on for quite some time. And when they started getting more violent, it became something that the government handled in a way that I understand why they didn't make it very public, but that fell on the lap of Western media and politicians. So they had a history of terrorism
Oh,
attacks. There's
because they were
hundreds of
silent.
people, thousands of people were killed, wounded, hurt with bombs, with
Hmm.
uh, getting stabbed. But the general Chinese public didn't hear about it. The vast majority of
Mm.
Westerners never heard about it. 2009, 2013, 2014. The Chinese government kept it
Hmm.
on the wraps for a very simple reason. They didn't want the rest of China to look at Islam in a bad way, or to look at the Uyghurs in a bad way, or to look at Xinjiang in a bad way. They were trying to deal with it in the most
Mm.
quiet way possible. So that led to, when
Oh,
things
okay.
started to change and they started talking about what they had to deal with for several years, decades, like, whoa, you're making this up. This doesn't add up. Why is it that the world hasn't heard about this since it's been This has been taking place for so many years. And that's where you can understand that
Mm-hmm.
there's a discrepancy between what they were trying to do and what the West expected them to do. Now, if you're having this situation, why haven't we heard about it? The only thing that people heard about were
Mm-hmm.
the 2009 situation in Kunming, where some of these extremists started just slashing people at the
Mm-hmm.
train station. Those were Uyghurs. Um, the situation in Tiananmen,
Mm-hmm.
where they drove a car with ISIS flags and whatnot, just running people over. So there were only like a few instances that people had heard about,
Mm-hmm.
but there were many, many cases of small bombs and stabbings and attacks like that that were taking place that were just kept under wraps, and they were dealing with it as best as they could. I
Mm-hmm.
perhaps the the thing that changed how the government was handling the situation and the whole population of Xinjiang and China woke up,
Mm-hmm.
so to what was going on and what needed to be done, was the assassination of the imam in Kashgar in 2014. This is an imam that was
Oh, okay.
a very moderate Muslim. There are moderate Muslims as
Mm-hmm.
there are moderate Catholics or moderate Jews. Do you know what I'm saying? There are there are people
Mm-hmm.
in the Catholic Church who don't follow the scripture to the T, to the point. Catholics, for example, are not supposed to mix fabrics. I don't know if you know that, but Deuteronomy, I don't know the English word, Deuteronomio 21 talks about that. So an
Oh.
extremist would see somebody mixing clothes and say like, "Hey, you're a sinner, you're this, you're that," and they're gonna take action on things like that. Catholics are not supposed to eat
Mm-hmm.
shellfish. Catholics do. So extremism is the issue. The interpretation of the religion and the imposition over others who are not that radical, who don't follow the scripture to that extent, was creating conflict. And that's what happened with the imam. People say like, if this can happen to an imam, to somebody who is respected in the community, in Islam, in the city, it can happen to anybody. So that was a wake up call for a lot of people, and that's when you could
Mm-hmm.
see the implementation of security measures and
Mm-hmm.
everything that started taking place.
Now, was that widely reported that the imam, the death of, because I do seem to remember after I came to China, and it would have been 2013 or 14,
2014. That took
about
place in
an issue
2014.
in Xinjiang.
Hmm.
So was that known to the public? Did
Um,
the government sort of
I
allow that
learned about it
information out?
much later. I don't know other people
Okay.
out there because I wasn't really following Xinjiang for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Only when
Yeah.
I started to hear these things and being in the mindset of, okay, Western media is not always very straightforward when it comes to China, I became interested in Xinjiang. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's when I told my wife in 2021, let's go. And we just bought tickets and went. So
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of that situation in 2014, but it definitely is the beginning of China implementing very strict measures in the area. The first one
Oh,
was
okay.
border, border security.
Mm-hmm.
The border is very difficult to secure because it's so long. There's so many countries, and the
Mm-hmm.
terrain is extremely difficult. It's very rocky
Mm-hmm.
mountains, high altitude. Um, it's very easy for, well, bad people to come in or go out
Mm-hmm.
um, easily. And Xinjiang is enormous. So once they come in, it's very easy for these individuals to hide in rural areas and just keep doing the indoctrination that they're doing, etc., etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So securing the borders was one of the most important things. Heavy
Mm-hmm.
police and military presence and surveillance capabilities. So we need to know who's coming and going. So
Mm-hmm.
that's I tell people, let's say for example that you're in a classroom and a mobile phone is stolen. Now, if you are the person in charge, if you're the teacher, right? How do you find that phone? You could do one of two things. You could go for the things that you know, the people that you know who are not the nicest people, but that will be profiling. If you ask Paul
Mm-hmm.
and Peter, open your backpacks because we need to see what's in them, then you'll be profiling. So, what is the other way to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to open their backpacks. Everybody opens their school bags, and we're going to find a phone. So, that's the mentality of registering everybody, getting the biometrics of everybody. Everybody had to get their photo taken
Mm-hmm.
and get their fingerprints and their phones, and they needed to know, they needed to find who the bad people were. Now, is that
Mm-hmm.
an infringement on people's rights, people's privacy? That's a discussion for people that are a much higher level. But in a simplified version of what I just
Mm-hmm.
explained in a classroom, that's what you would do. Because this is the only way for you to
Mm-hmm.
find out who took the phone. Ah, it was actually Mark. It was not Paul. It was not Peter. So you
Mm-hmm.
either profile or you don't.
Right.
You either profile or you get everybody on this
Mm-hmm.
database, on this registration, so that we know who you are, what you do, how you do it. And that's what took place. That was the other thing that took place. So yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
also is obvious that this is going to rub off negatively on the bad people and also on good people. There
Mm-hmm.
are innocent people who might not agree with this, who might not appreciate what this is hoping to do. Now, that initial
Mm-hmm.
resistance to what the government wanted to do is very possible. It's very possible that people were vocal about it and they did not appreciate the the necessary steps to bring back safety and peace. Now, fast forward
Mm-hmm.
7 years,
Okay.
right? And you see
Mm-hmm.
people. This is what I see when I talk about Xinjiang is people are happy. It's not touristy tours or government. No, people are generally happy. People are living in peace, safe, and they appreciate that. So when when they look at what they had to go through in order to get where they are now, perhaps there's a bit of acceptance and understanding that, well, that had to be done. Were there other possibilities?
Mm.
Perhaps.
Okay.
There are people who say, oh, but
Mm-hmm.
we need to investigate and find out whether this was an abuse or this was a violation of human rights. And I tell these people, when China implemented the different measures in Xinjiang, they did what they thought would be the best thing, the best
Mm-hmm.
solution to their problem. Could there be others? Of course. But I don't think that criticizing what China did is going to be embraced by the Chinese government.
I remember Pakistani Prime Minister from the time, Imran Khan, telling the American media that Xinjiang is China's internal matter when he was quizzed about the Uyghur problem. And now that I think about it, I don't recall countries like Saudi Arabia saying anything either. I am wondering, did any Muslim leaders have any problem with Xinjiang?
There's a couple of things to say. Number one is that I don't think that Chinese are willing to discuss the measures that they took. They took the measures that they thought were the best possible. This is what needs to be done. Um, and that's that. So yeah, I don't think that the Chinese government is going to be openly discussing the measures and justifying it to the general public. I do believe that a lot of the experts and the representatives of the Muslim community that have visited Xinjiang have been told all the truth. This is what took place. This is what happened. And this is what we did. And this is why we did it. And they walk away understanding what China tried to do, what China has accomplished. None of these majority Muslim countries uh, has any issue with Xinjiang. The only countries that have an issue with what took place in Xinjiang, the measures to bring back safety, are the countries that have been killing uh, Muslims for decades. They didn't care about the Muslims in Afghanistan. They didn't care about the Muslims in Syria. They don't care about the Muslims in Libya. They don't care about them in Iraq. But the ones in Xinjiang, yes, those we do care a lot. We do worry about those. So you got to look at things from that perspective. The Muslim leaders that have visited Xinjiang, they understand the situation. They have been explained and shown the reasoning, the logic, the reasons for what they did, and they walk away with an understanding of what had to be done and how effective it has been. But within all of this, and every time I talk about this, every time I make a video about this, I always tell people, look, in a situation like Xinjiang that endure terrorism, do you think it's possible that there was abuse? Do you think it's possible that a police officer just flew off the handle and did something that shouldn't be done? That's likely. That happens all over the world. It's true. So, is there a possibility that that took place in Xinjiang in the heat of this war against terrorism? It's possible. Remember that there were high level scholars, there were members of the police force who were actually separatists, extremists, and terrorist supporters. So, did what happens when a police officer finds out that this person was actually betraying them? Is it possible that they flew off the handle? Absolutely. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. However, was it policy? Was it systemic? Was it endemic? There's zero evidence that that's true. Is it possible that, as I said earlier, some people did not want to be part of this, uh, taking the photos and registering your biometrics? Very possible, of course. Now, did it become an effective measure in bringing back safety? Yes. So there's discussions to be had about Xinjiang, but you cannot start having an honest discussion about these things when you're coming just guns blazing and attacking and lying and twisting the stories and just that's not going to be entertained by the Chinese government. That's not going to be entertained. I think that the people that have come here as uh, Muslim leaders and scholars that had the opportunity to understand, they walk away with a clear understanding of the situation. I'm just looking at it from the outside. I'm not a journalist. I don't have an inside informant. I no, zero. My body of work has been documenting daily life. But I'm talking as a reasonable person, a person with two fingers of a brain and two working brain cells, trying to explain the logic behind things. Um, so let's say, for example, that there were abuses, right? Let's say that there were abuses. What makes us think that the government didn't punish those officers? Ah, because we haven't heard about it. Remember that we didn't even hear about the terrorist attacks for decades. So if the government did not tell us about the bad things that these terrorists were doing, do you think the government is going to tell us about the corrections that took place when policemen or military or whatever made mistakes and abused somebody? No. So the fact that we haven't heard about it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. And I loved this latest issue with all these NGOs calling for the release of this particular scholar or this particular person or because they have been unfairly detained or unjustly detained or whatever. And as time goes by, we find out that those people actually were terrorist supporters. The best case to show you that was Ilham Tohti. He was an economist and a scholar. And recently, this video that has come out of him actually indoctrinating his students from the classroom, supporting the terrorists. This is the same Ilham Tohti that these NGOs and pundits and whatnot claim that he was innocent and unfairly like. So I made a video and I said, like, look, when China imprisons somebody, is because there are reasons. The fact that you and I don't know what the reasons are doesn't mean that there aren't. And China will not react to pressure. They will come out with the evidence when they're good and ready. You don't like that? Well, you're going to have to deal with that. But the fact is that they have been able to prove and show to people what took place in Xinjiang, what people did, and how they worked and operated. So yeah, it's not as open as people would want it. But you go back and look at the different things that they have shown, and like, hey, there's reason here. Hey, there's just clear evidence that these people were doing bad things, and they deserve to be in prison. So yeah, it's is that situation where China has to deal with what is expected of it from the West and what China is willing to do in terms of transparency. They did what they
Hmm.
thought had to be done, and the discussion whether that was an
Hmm.
abuse or not is something that the Chinese probably don't want to participate in, particularly when they can now say,
Hmm.
look how it worked. Because that's what I see going to more than 40 locations in 5 months. Small places, big places, villages, towns, counties, all around. What you see is people going about their lives, in harmony, in peace, with safety,
Mm.
being prosperous, and coming together as a region and as a country. There's something that a lot of people don't understand when you talk to when you talk to Chinese people in Xinjiang, they're actually very appreciative. They appreciate how the rest of China comes together whenever there are issues in Xinjiang. For example, when there are sanctions on the tomatoes in Xinjiang,
Mm.
when there are sanctions on cotton in Xinjiang, when there are sanctions on solar panel industry in Xinjiang, when there are all these issues imposed by the West based on very flimsy evidence, what do the Chinese do? They just go overboard and start consuming Xinjiang products. Xinjiang cotton, Xinjiang
Mm.
fruit, Xinjiang everything, and they compensate for the losses in trade, the unfair losses in trade that had been infringed on the people of Xinjiang, and they appreciate that. Summer after summer, there are just millions of people from around the country that go there to spend their money, to buy things, to to learn things, to do you know what I'm saying? And that idea of
Yeah.
China has our back, the
Mm.
rest of China has our back, you can actually feel it. You can actually feel the appreciation of the tourists, the people
Mm.
who go there. Um,
Wow.
they're welcome because they have their backs.
Wow.
Every single campaign, and you see it on social media here in China. Uh, this is made with Xinjiang cotton.
Mm.
Oh, and people prefer the ones that's made with Xinjiang cotton as opposed to the one from wherever. There is that reaction in the Chinese uh, population to support Xinjiang whenever there are
Mm.
attacks in the West, and this is something that few people know about or notice when they talk about Xinjiang or when they see Xinjiang. So my experience going there is people are happy, people are fine, people are able to appreciate that what they had to go through, they might have not approved of it or it might have not been a pleasant experience, but today they can see the fruit of the things and the measures that were implemented. And as I said before, don't expect China to
Mm.
accept being questioned, particularly when the result is so positive.
Well, that's really interesting. So the West puts these sanctions on Xinjiang with the idea of protecting the people from Xinjiang, but and the rest of China responds by filling in replacing the original
Consuming
customers
more.
from the West with other Chinese. So they're supporting Xinjiang more than ever,
Exactly.
probably, and brings the country together more tightly.
Yeah, they
Huh.
yeah, that symbol of the pomegranate fruit is something that you see all over Xinjiang, and the symbol is as the seeds are tied together and make this very delicious fruit that grows all over Xinjiang. That's how they see themselves, like the unity of every minority and every different ethnic group coming together and sticking together and seeing all the challenges and all the issues through together. So pomegranate is a very important symbol in Xinjiang that I discovered this message when I was there.
Thank you for joining us for the first part of this special interview with Fernando Munoz Bernal. Join us next week for the second part as we investigate the reality of Xinjiang and find answers to questions that are seldom raised in the mainstream media.